Welcome to the Life's Better podcast, a podcast dedicated to this idea that life is so much better with God, community, and purpose. On the show, we're going to be talking about how we can actually help you find some love and joy in a dead-end job. Now, whether or not you have a dead-end job or not, I think this will be helpful. A couple of years ago...
We both do, right?
Yeah, we're struggling, and so we want to help those who are struggling. A couple of years ago, there was this commercial. It was a beer commercial that started out with the scene. There's an alarm clock that went off, and someone reaches over, grabs it, and then this guy, the next scene, is rushing out the door with like a piece of toast in his hand, and then the next scene, it's him, driving in traffic, horns honking, and he's clearly miserable. And then the next scene after that, he's in a cubicle, and he's got his boss yelling at him, and then the scene finishes with him falling into his bed at night, exhausted, and then it starts all over again. And this happens like 3 times. And then it breaks, though, when someone tosses him a Miller. And he grabs a Miller and he pops that open with a friend. And then obviously this party erupts behind them. And it's fantastic. The subtle message, your life's not that great. Work is not that great. The only thing that really brings meaning is having a beer with friends. So Josh and I, we're just going to crack open some beers today, and we're not.
Audio listeners, there is no beer on any of these tables. No, don't get the wrong idea.
It's behind the camera. No one knows. So here's the thing, though. We are going to work about 90,000 hours in a lifetime on average. That's 1/3.
90,000?
Yeah, 90,000. That's 1/3 of your life.
Okay.
So if you don't love your job, that's going to make an impact on your life. And there's Barna Research Group. Every 4 years they'll do this study, and they find the same result every single time. They find that only 13% of people actually love their job.
Really?
63% of people are kind of meh about their job. Mm-hmm. They're slightly engaged, but for the most part, not really into it. And then 24%, almost a quarter of the population, hate their job, which I think is pretty high.
Yeah.
And so the goal of our podcast today is we improve that. We want to improve that a little bit. And before we get into that, Josh and I, we're going to play a game.
Yeah.
We're calling it Hat Seat.
Yeah.
And it's a twist on our game that we like to play called Hot Seat. Some of you listeners, viewers, you've written in some questions for Josh and I to answer about either our current career or careers that we've had in the past. And we're just going to reach into a hat. We're going to draw your questions out. The ones that you draw, you'll answer. The ones I draw, I'll answer.
I'm excited for this.
And
this is a neat idea. I might regret saying I'm excited for it, but I think it's cool.
We've got
Thanks for those of you that wrote in questions. I appreciate that.
Yes. We've got this cool cowboy hat. I don't know how cool it is, but go ahead and...
It's pretty cool, yeah.
You want to draw the first one?
All right. And I answer the first one, right?
Yes.
All right. So, here's my first question. It says, if you could change anything about your current position, what would it be? This is an interesting question because this last year I feel like has made everyone think that because everybody's positions at their jobs have probably changed, whether unfortunately you got laid off or you had to adapt to the current climate. And I really discovered a love for tech and I rediscovered a love for editing videos. Those of you that know, even just this podcast is only a year old. I get to edit this. We get to do a lot more videos. I kind of have really taken a huge leap into that area. And I've realized that not only hopefully I have a little bit of talent with it, but I also really, really enjoy it. And so in using that to share the gospel in creative ways is interesting to me. So I think in the future, I would love to, I guess, just to get to do more of it.
Yeah,
and I love that, and I'm learning more about how people use that in even more ways that we haven't yet to reach people, and it's interesting to me. So
yeah,
that's mine.
No, I like it. All right, my question is: have you ever gotten sick at work? Yes, I have gotten sick at work. In fact, I think it was week 1 of a job, I got sick. No. And it was one of those, you're just delirious. But it was my first week. Or either that or it was the beginning of my second week. I can't remember. And I just plowed through it and ended up getting at least 2 other people sick after that. But it was I had to. It was my first week.
Do you think you got it from somebody when you got there, or do you think you just brought it into the job?
I really don't know, but yeah, it was a miserable half a week for sure.
Yikes! What job was it?
Yeah, it was working at Publix.
Publix, okay.
That doesn't exist here, but yeah.
All right, so mine is: have you ever dated someone at work? I was about to immediately say no, but I think technically yes. My wife and I both worked at a summer camp together.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And so I think that counts.
Yeah, totally.
We started
Were you dating at the time?
We worked at this summer camp multiple years in a row, and she'd always been dating this other guy for the whole time.
What a loser, right? That nerd.
And she was dating him at the beginning of that summer, but broke up with him, and then she went on a mission trip to Honduras through the people that I go through, and so we immediately started connecting over that. I had always had a crush on her, and so it all just kind of worked out. So yeah, we totally dated while I was at work, and I guess that improved my quality of how much I loved my job.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just curious if you had some sabotage going on in that camp, like trying to ruin things for that.
No, I mean I never saw him though, okay. So I guess no, I'm not that type of person either.
All right, my question is: have you ever lied about something at work? Yeah, I've lied about something at work. One that's really embarrassing. This is actually at another church. It was just dumb too. I don't even know why I lied. I do know why. But I went to the kitchen and I just happened to look in the pantry, and I'm not one of those guys that is always snacking on food. But I just looked in there real quick, I wonder what's in here. And I don't know, there were some crackers or something. I was like, okay, I'll grab a cracker. And right then, someone walks in, one of the other employees, and oh, busted a guy. I was like, no, I was actually just checking supplies for the youth, and I totally lied. And she knew I was lying, I'm sure. And it was, why'd I do that? I don't know.
You got caught. And that instinct kicked in. Okay, so there's only... Oh, there's a few more. Never mind. I thought there was only 2 more. There's a whole pile and they're sneaking underneath. Okay. Why do I get the ones like this? Mine is, what do you enjoy the least about your current position? I feel like this is just us having a end of the year review and me getting to tell you everything I want. Let's see. What do I like least about my current position? I hate that we haven't gone on trips in the last year, and I missed that quite a bit. I didn't think that I would, in all honesty. If I'm being entirely honest, I love my time on trips after the fact, but planning for them is miserable. Yeah. And making you just constantly have these what if scenarios pop in your mind, and am I ready? Am I prepared enough? But that by the time they're over, you've loved them. It's just very, very stressful.
The lead up time can be stressful.
Now that I've had a year and a half off, I miss it. I miss it a lot. So I'm excited for Camp Calvary this summer.
I was going to say, camp's coming up pretty soon.
Yeah.
All right, my next question is, what's the worst job you've ever had? Worst job I've ever had. I've had some that I really haven't enjoyed. The one that first came to my mind, though...
Anderson Christian Church.
No. This was when I was 8 years old, right around 8 or 9 years old. I got hired by my neighbor to do some work in his backyard, and he was this Hispanic guy, really thick accent, and he walks me out to his backyard, and he's got 4 dogs, and clearly he's never picked up after them ever. So there's dog business everywhere, and with his thick, Hispanic accent, he hands me a shovel, and he says, "Pick up the turds." And I looked and I was like, "The what?" "Pick up the turds," and he starts pointing at all this dog business. And the problem was he had a thick accent.
Yeah.
And my family, we don't use the word turd.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, what
so you had
is
no
he?
idea
I had no idea what he was talking about. But eventually, he said it 6 times. "Pick up the turds." And finally I was like, I think he's referring to the poop. Okay, that's my job. And it was just a miserable day of cleaning up after dogs. That's
How much
what that
did you
was.
get?
$5.
$5.
I don't remember exactly, but I do remember thinking this wasn't worth it.
All right. I think we each have one more.
Awesome.
I don't know about. I might be wrong again.
No, you got it.
All right. What was your worst excuse for getting out of work? All right. Man, my worst excuse. I'm trying to think back, like, I don't know how many, like, I might have, like, made them up in my head, like, meaning that, like, I've made this out to be way worse than, like, I could have gone in. Like, there are times where, and Emily says this too, where if I'm sick, I just don't want to do anything at all.
Motivation is gone.
And so, like, if I have a cold, like, we have an opportunity to work at home now, but, like, I'm just, like, I'm not doing anything at all. I'm going to lay on the couch, cover up in a blanket, and just do nothing for maybe 3 to 4 days.
Nice.
And, like, that's just, I don't know, my attitude of, if I don't feel good, I don't want to do anything.
Okay.
So I need to work on that, and I realize that. But over the last year,
I was going to say, you haven't been sick
I've not
like
been
at all.
I've not really missed work at all. So
We
that's
totally
nice.
we totally just jinxed that.
Yeah, I was going to say, everybody's going to be like, where's Josh on Sunday?
I was thinking tomorrow, but I guess you could skip out on Sunday. All right, last one for me. What is the most annoying thing? I think this was supposed to be for you. What is the most annoying thing your current boss has ever done? I'm going to answer this as though, like, I'm answering it like, what's the most annoying thing Josh has ever done?
Okay.
I don't know if
I'm your employer?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know if I've actually, I can't think of a really annoying thing that you've done. Okay, something that I realized about you, it's not annoying, but I just had to realize it about you. You're quiet. And so sometimes, like, I'm deep in work, and all of a sudden, like, you're in my doorway, and it's like, whoa, hey, how's it going, Josh? Like, I didn't hear you sneak up on me. This is fun. What do you need?
This is why we need doors that just automatically close, because, like, whenever I'm there and I'm like, I gotta talk to Jonathan, but should I shout from the other room? Should I go up to the door? And oh man, he's working. I don't want to bother him, so I'm just gonna stand here awkwardly and wait until he notices me. Yeah, no, I get that.
But it's
Tina's the same way. Oh my gosh,
she's stealthy.
She tries though.
Okay.
Like, she'll wait around corners for me to, like, pop, and then
Boo!
she will do that on purpose, and she knows that I'm jumpy, so she needs to be careful though, because there's times where, like, my first instinct is to, like, throw a swing,
punch someone in the face. Don't sneak up on Josh. That's the rule here. All right, so hopefully you've had some fun getting to know our work experience and our current levels of, annoyance or joy. We're going to start talking about you and how we can improve in this area of overall just happiness at work. Because again, 90%, or I should say 63% of you are just kind of like meh about work, but 24% of you, like a quarter of you hate your work. And so let's just see how we can improve that. I think there's some obvious answers to this, and we're not going to get into the obvious ones. I mean, some of it just has to do with, are you cut out for that work? Like, do you have the capacity to do it? No one's going to hire me to be an accountant. I just don't have the capacity to do that. But if you find yourself, in a position where you're constantly doing something that you just don't have the capacity for, obviously you're not going to enjoy it. You need to find other work. Environment's another big one. If you're around toxic people, or a job that's just destroying your body.
I think that's a huge one. In
right.
all honesty. Like, it doesn't matter if the work is good or bad. If the people, for me specifically, if the people around me are tearing me down or lifting me up, that matters more than anything.
Yeah, it can make or break for sure. So the list could go on and on for some obvious answers. Yeah. We're going to throw out one suggestion, one tip that I think really blends well with just our podcast as a whole, this idea that life is better with God, community, and purpose. And the idea behind this is you actually can bring meaning to your work. So whatever task you have, the tip is bring meaning to it. Now, that may sound really simplistic and maybe overly so, but we are meaning machines. Like, as human beings, God has hardwired us to find meaning in things. Let's just give some examples here. Okay, so Josh, I snuck into your office today.
Oh boy, here we go. Okay.
And I took this off of your desk.
I didn't even notice.
I was wondering if you were going to. So for those of you who cannot, you're not watching this from YouTube, this is a framed picture, a couple
Very
pictures.
dusty because I never dust my office.
Of Josh and his ordination. We've got a picture of Emily praying over him, your grandparents and your dad praying over you, and then we've got this cool little Romans 8, 38 through 39 explaining what's going on. Okay, clearly this has some meaning for you. Why is this on your desk? What's the meaning behind it?
Honestly, it just reminds me of why I am doing what I'm doing. It reminds me of the people that have been there for me for a really long time and have prayed over this ministry and like all of that stuff. And yeah, it brings a lot of, not only, I guess meaning is the same thing as importance, but I think of the, like, every time I see that, I'm reminded, oh, not only is this a job, this is a ministry that God has called me to, that people have, blessed and everything, and so I need to give everything I have towards it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So even just a picture and a verse can bring so much life and meaning to you. How about this one? Let's say it's a Wednesday night and one of your students lifts their middle finger at you.
Okay.
What are you thinking? How are you going to respond? Like, what's going to happen?
My first response to stuff like that is typically not the best. And it's not like I'm mad at them. It's more like, how have I not created a space where this doesn't happen? But, like, that doesn't make me want to, quit my job or anything like that. It's like, I still feel called to do this. I still have meaning here.
Now let me ask you this, though.
Okay.
Like, why would it be a big deal anyway? It's just a finger.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why is that such a problem?
You're right. It absolutely is just one of our fingers, so it's okay for me to do it on the podcast, right?
Probably not.
Yeah, exactly.
Why? Because we have put meaning behind it, right?
Yeah.
As a culture, there's such a strong meaning behind it. We don't do that unless you're really angry or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, let me throw out another one. Let's say it's 4th of July.
Okay.
And maybe there's some patriotic music playing in the background.
Okay.
Maybe a couple fireworks, I don't know. And then you just see the American flag, waving gently in the breeze. Emotionally, does that do anything for you?
Yeah.
Okay, what's happening?
Specifically, you remember, like, when it was made and, like, all of the moments that people have, fought for that, that not only the flag but the country, because that's what the flag represents. Otherwise, it's literally just a piece of cloth painted, floating in the wind, but we bring meaning to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And let's say we take that same flag and we fly it over, let's say, a Middle Eastern country that's not really into the United States. I mean, that might stir something very different inside them, to the point where they might want to grab their gun and start firing it off. We bring meaning to so many things. So because we're meaning machines, we have the ability to do this even with our work. And we can bring meaning into our work to the point where we are able to enjoy it. And I know the natural pushback is, yeah, that sounds really nice. That sounds really lovely, but that's not easy to do. Scripture actually encourages us to do this. In fact, Josh, you're going to read a section of Scripture that really highlights this whole idea of bringing meaning and value into whatever task, even if it is mundane and tedious.
All right, so it's in Colossians 3:23, it says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for men."
So, Paul, he's chatting it up with us, and he says, hey, Josh, even if you have a dead-end job, even if you're doing something really tedious, really monotonous, what are we supposed to do?
We're supposed to do it as if we're doing it for God himself.
Yeah. You bring that meaning to say, hey, even though this is something small, even though this is something maybe even miserable, I'm going to spin this around and I'm going to do it for God. Basically says, hey, bring God into this. Make it about him. There's something that happens inside your heart and inside your soul when you connect those really dreaded things with, yeah, but I have a higher calling, a higher purpose, and maybe I can make those smaller, less enjoyable things actually move that higher purpose forward. On the flip side of this, because I think, again, some people would say, yeah, but you don't realize I'm that 24%. I hate my job. It's just such a drudgery. Let me ask you, who was Paul writing to?
He was writing to slaves at the moment, which is just insane to think about. Like, how can you tell them to do their work as if they're doing it for God,
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're hating your job, at least know that you've got some freedom. Some of you are like, no, I feel like a slave.
Yeah.
But even in that moment, you can still do it for God in a meaningful way.
It reminds me a lot of Joseph, the story of Joseph, because Joseph, when he was enslaved in Egypt, when he was working for Potiphar, and even when he got his even nicer job. Like I can guarantee you, if you ask Joseph which job did you like more, he'd say the one where he was given all of the power and basically second in command in Egypt.
Right.
But he worked just as hard in both, not because he liked his job, but because of this. That he had that mentality of, well, wherever I am, I'm going to work as hard as I can because I serve a God who is going to, he's going to handle things. He's going to take care of me, even if I'm in a bad situation or a good situation.
And we see, particularly in Joseph's situation, God blessing him because he chose to bring that higher purpose into that position.
Yeah, it took a while.
It took a little while. You're right. It did. I've got, because I grew up in the Bay Area and actually lived for many years in San Jose, which is known as the Silicon Valley. I've got a lot of friends in the tech industry, and I remember a number of years ago, I had a friend who was working on a product for Apple, and he said, "Man, this product, it's going to be a game changer." I was like, and he can't tell me anything about it, right? They're sworn to secrecy. I was like, "Okay, cool." A couple months later, guess what came out? It's a game changer, Apple product. What's the biggest game changer?
iPod?
Not the iPod. The iPhone. The iPhone came out,
okay.
and it was just this.
That was a good call there. He absolutely is right.
Yeah. I mean, total game changer. And I remember afterwards, like, dude, was this it? Was this what you were working on? He's like, yeah. And he was telling me how all the little features and what specifically he worked on. He was really excited about it. But what was interesting is at the end of the conversation, I remember him looking at me and saying, yeah, but honestly, I really wish I could be doing what you and Dana are doing. And at the time, we had just finished 2 years of ministry as missionaries in Africa, and we were re-upping for another 2. And it dawned on me that it really doesn't matter if you've got that dead-end job or you're working for a tech industry or in the tech industry, moving technology forward in amazing ways. If you don't attach what you're doing to a deeper, higher calling and purpose, it's gonna come up short at some point.
Yeah.
I'm curious, in your own life, where do you find yourself? I think you've even just shared with this picture of Emily praying over you, your ordination. Where do you find that deeper calling, and when do you have to remind yourself of that?
So this is something that I think that I don't want to label myself as something bad, but I definitely don't have that type A mentality a lot, and I think it's because I don't know, maybe I do, but I just have a focus that's very lasered in on this, which is, I've grown up around so many pastors and missionaries, and even people who are just small group leaders who are government workers, but they come to church and they mentor me, and I just all associated them together. I don't think that the pastor is necessarily higher than the government worker who came and mentored me or shares his faith at work. And I just constantly had them sharing things like, my job doesn't really matter unless God is calling me to it. And the thing that I'm doing is me being a missionary where God has called me to be, no matter what it is.
Love that.
And so if I'm in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, and I have a mission field of, I work at Kroger, and so my mission field is everybody who walks in and buys groceries in my line, then I have a mentality that's better than anything because I've gone on mission trips, and nobody is ever really, unless you just go into the mission trip wrong, nobody really cares about what they're being told to do. You could be told, go pick up trash in a neighborhood that really needs to be cleaned, or you can be told, do this hard manual labor for a whole week, and you'll do it excited because you've gone there feeling called by God. Well, have that mentality in life, and that's why I, for those of you that don't know, I got a degree in Christian missions, and with a minor in Spanish. And I know one day I'll use the Spanish thing for something, but anybody who's talked to me and said, well, don't you feel like you should be on location somewhere, is always, I am. Right. What do you mean should I be on location somewhere? I am, and I'm working full time doing this, which I know that not everybody can, but even if I wasn't, even if I was just working at GameStop or Kroger or something
Sure.
like that, I would still consider myself a missionary
Yeah.
where I am. Does that make sense at all?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
love that you bring that up, because in other parts of the Bible, it talks about how if you're a follower of Christ, you're actually an ambassador of
Yes.
Christ.
Yeah.
And so let's just even maybe play this one out a little bit. Let's say you're an ambassador of the United States.
Okay.
What country, first of all, would you want to be an ambassador to? Do you have a favorite?
Spain.
Spain.
Sure.
Okay, so you can use your Spanish.
Yeah,
There
exactly.
you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so
That was my first thought. I was like, what's a pretty country that speaks Spanish?
That Spain, that'd be it.
Yeah.
So Spain, you have a responsibility as an American ambassador to, foster peace, good trade, goodwill. Like that's your higher calling as an ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that going to influence, let's say, just the daily, normal things? Let's say you're shopping in an open market.
Okay.
Like, how is that higher calling of being an ambassador of the United States going to affect your interactions with those that you're connecting with?
I would say that it would definitely cause me to think less about why I'm the groceries that I'm there, and how can I meet people, how can I be respectful to every single person that I meet, so that they see me and then reflect thinking, or go away from those interactions thinking, oh, the United States is filled
Right.
with these kind people.
Right.
Yeah?
They're not that bad.
Yeah.
This gentleman was so kind.
In all honesty, I would probably try to maintain a decent looking figure so that people would look at me and be like, oh, well, maybe not all of the U.S. is super fat, something like that. Sorry, that was where my mind went to. Just trying to break down those stereotypes.
And maybe, let's say you have even another task. It's not just doing normal tasks, but
Okay.
let's say you're on a location as an ambassador, specifically looking at one of the coal mines in Spain, and
Okay.
someone hands you a pickaxe and says, "Now you try." And you don't necessarily want to be picking at coal for the next half hour.
Okay.
But as an ambassador of the United States, how are you going to respond to that?
I'll obviously not turn my nose up at this individual, and I'll attempt and probably poorly do it, but at least they'll look at me and think, oh, wow, he's willing to do this. He's not, disrespectful and all that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, even if you didn't necessarily like the task of chipping out coal, or you don't like the task of having to do your own shopping, or let's say someone gets angry at the United States and they have some sort of racial slur or whatever it is, because you got that higher calling that, no, I need to represent the United States well in everything that I do, you will probably lay your head at night having satisfaction in the job well done.
Yeah.
And I think this is exactly what happens when we enter our jobs and our careers saying, okay, my first calling is to Christ, and I'm going to be an ambassador of His, and I'm going to live my life in such a way that points back to His goodness and His greatness, because that's what He's done for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that with that comes a lot of faith and trust that you have to have, because, a lot of people are like, well, are you reaching the most, in this area or whatever? And a lot of my peace comes from the idea of, well, I'm trusting that God has me where He wants me, and I know that for some of you, that we talked about, you're in that position where you absolutely just hate where you are, and you don't feel like God is calling you somewhere else yet. This is probably the best way to overcome that depression and that sadness and that monotony that can set in, and when you approach that toxic relationship, or when you approach that just task that you don't feel like you're very good at, and you're or even that you just hate, you've gotten to a point where I can't stand doing this thing anymore. Think about how you can bring your calling, your higher calling, into it, because if you don't feel called somewhere else, then I guarantee you there's a person or there's a task that you're there for. And I don't know. That's something that I personally have that mindset going into things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a very healthy mindset. Now, there may be some listening who are saying, that's well and good, bring meaning into my work, but honestly, work is just a means to an end. It's just a paycheck, and I want to get paid. Well, God actually addresses that desire just to get paid and to have that bonus. Let's finish off that section of Scripture. So again, if you're wanting to reference it, it's Colossians chapter 3. Josh has read 23, and now he's going to read the next one as well.
Do you want 23 as well?
Yeah, let's go ahead and just get that bookend.
Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord and not for men, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving.
All right, so if someone is saying, I just want to get paid, what has God just told us?
Well, he said that you definitely need to work at it as if you're serving me, because you're going to receive an inheritance, a reward for your hard work. If you're just getting by, you're getting by serving the Lord. That's not a good thing. That's something to avoid.
And when you're doing it for Him, it's going to be a whole lot. That reward that He's going to give us is going to be so much better than the minimum wage that you're making at that job.
And I think it's important too, and I don't know if you were going to touch on this or not, but like the difference I think between reading this and missing the mark and hitting prosperity gospel is that it's not necessarily a earthly reward. Now, we talked about Joseph. He worked hard, and then got accused by Potiphar's wife, and then eventually it led to this great scenario for him. But for some people, that you might not see that until the other side of this, of our eternal life.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because I've told my students this all the time, and they always get really freaked out by the idea of it. But like, you're gonna live like to the max, like 100 years here.
Right.
You're going to live to be eventually 1,100,000 years old. And you still have way more millions to go.
Yeah.
And this is just going to be like a distant memory, if we even have a memory of it at all at that point.
Right.
If at all, even if we get to heaven. And those million years are going to be lived amazingly well. So why am I worried? Let's work hard, even if it's something that you hate. Like, work hard at it, because that inheritance is so much better than, man, if I work really hard, maybe I'll get a higher paycheck, or maybe these people will treat me better. No, if you work really hard for the Lord, think about how great glory is going to be, how heaven's going to be. I don't know if that helps or not. Or...
Absolutely, because I think we all need an incentive from time to time. It's great. Yeah, I want to be that ambassador for Christ. But sometimes we just need that reminder of that incentive, of that, that reward that God will be giving us. Maybe we're not going to have it at the end of the day, or the end of the week, or the end of the month, or even at the end of the year with the, the fun, fancy bonus. But like you said, it's coming. And I notice this even with my kids. My kids will, just be doing some... I got a kid. I'm not going to name him, but he just can't seem to put his shoes where his shoes belong. And we had a conversation a couple weeks ago. I was like, dude, here's the thing. You start putting your shoes where they belong, and I'll give you a character point. This is just something that we do as a family. When we notice one of our kids is living like Christ, we'll give them what we call a character point. And if you get so many character points, you get to redeem that, something at the store or something. He's like, okay. And no problem. Like, the entire week, he puts them right where they need to be, and he's continued to do that. Well, how did he get to that point? Well, he needed the incentive. And God's saying, hey, I get it. Sometimes this world and your job and you in slavery, it is rough. I understand that. Here's the incentive. Work at it as though you're doing it for me. That will bring your life joy. That will bring your life meaning. And on the other side, too, don't worry. I'm going to back the truck up, and you are going to have your reward in heaven as well. Final thoughts would be just to encourage you. I was talking actually with a headhunter. This was a couple years ago, someone who hires people for companies. And he was saying how we live in a C- world. And he, I think, had just grown a little cynical, and he was basically explaining that most people just put in enough effort not to get fired. And, he was saying it, being pretty discouraged with some of the hires that he's made. It's like, oh, yeah, that's a C- guy. And it made me think, as Christians, I hope we're never C- people. Because if we're doing it as though we're doing it for the Lord, man, who better to do your best work for? And so a couple of questions just to have you maybe move into some application would be, one, how can you continue to bring meaning into your work? Second, where have you maybe been putting in C- work, and how can you elevate that to an A+? I think, again, it goes back to make sure you're doing it for that higher calling, that higher purpose, which is your relationship with God. Any final thoughts, Josh?
No, I just think this is something that is a little bit of an epidemic, and especially this last year, I know that many people that I've talked to that are around my age, and I assume this is probably true for most people, is that there's a lot of fatigue going on. You've been called by your bosses or your higher ups or supervisors to be able to do more. I know especially people who are working in restaurants or working at like grocery stores feel this way. They've when everybody else got time off, they were expected to do more, and so like there can be this angst, this I deserve and I'm going to get what's mine attitude that you bring to each day that will kill you, and it doesn't hurt anybody except for you, and so having this mindset where it's not I'm serving my boss better because he deserves it, or I'm serving my supervisor or Walmart or whoever better because they deserve it, because you're never going to convince yourself that they deserve it. You're going to convince yourself that you deserve something better. But if you are thinking I'm doing this for God, it's really hard for you to back down from that and be like, oh well, God deserves this and it's less than the best. And I think this is really valuable, especially if because not all of us can have that dream job, but it can become exactly what it needs to be for you if you are thinking I'm here for a reason. God's bringing X person or X task into my vision because it needs to be done by me.
Yeah, this is my mission field.
Yeah.
Well, God bless, guys. Until next time, know that life is so much better with God, community, and purpose.